Welcome to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons, the podcast where we cut through the noise and share strategies that actually drive customer-led growth. Each week, we bring you straight-talking conversations on adoption, retention, expansion, and everything in between. Let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. I'm Jason Noble here in London, joined as always by my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
We've got a really special episode today with a special guest, and we're exploring that tension between automation, humanity, empathy, the kind of emotional side of things, where the humans fit in, where customer engagement fits in. So it's a really, really big one. And really looking at what we're going to talk about is how do SaaS companies keep growth scalable without using that human connection that drives loyalty and trust. And I really think, given what we're seeing with AI and that trend that's going to continue, it's a really, really key one. And we've got the perfect guest for this. We've got Bruce Temkin. Bruce is the founder of the Humanity at Scale podcast and one of the leading voices on customer experience and organizational psychology. He's spent his career defining what leadership means in an era that's shaped by technology, AI, complexity, and human disconnection. He's the visionary behind the Humanity at Scale movement, helping organizations succeed by amplifying humanity, not minimizing it. He's an engineer by training and a human systems thinker at heart, and he's helped shape how the world's best companies think about trust, empathy, and purpose as central drivers of performance. Bruce, it's an honor to have you with us. I love the work you've done. I think this is going to be such a cool conversation, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I think the work you've done, Bruce, it really aligns with a lot of the conversations that Jason and I have at work in what we do. It aligns with what many of our guests said here on the podcast and what we've talked about. You've spent your career, I think, decoding what makes customers loyal, which is massive, but loyal, not just happy, not just satisfied. And there's a big difference. I'd love to kick off by you telling us what does humanity at scale mean? And what does it mean when a SaaS company says it wants to be both efficient and drive growth and empathetic at the same time? Big questions to start.
I like, we're going to just sort of nudge into this, and we'll talk about global warming, how to stop that, and make peace around the world. So Humanity at Scale is, I've worked with companies around customer experience, employee experience. I've been around technology trends for decades. And what I realized is that a lot of the value that can be created from technology movements ends up getting inhibited by the perception and direction of leaders. So Humanity at Scale is really focusing on how do we equip leaders to understand human beings and therefore make decisions that help their organization succeed while not leaving behind a trail of miserable people. The miserable people can be employees, they could be customers, they could be the communities that you build in. And because I have a fundamental sort of proposition, which is that I don't think that there is a trade-off. You have to make a trade-off between focusing on people and focusing on results. And as soon as you fall into that trap, which I think too many leaders fall into, then it's a zero-sum game, right? And you hear all these discussions. Well, I have to hit my numbers. I can't do that with my customers, or and the story about efficiency. Efficiency is about doing something with less resources. Efficiency doesn't talk about necessarily the results you get, or if you're doing the right things to begin with, right? So the push to efficiency only gets you sort of, if you do it really, really well, you end up squeezing your business into mediocrity. And that doesn't mean that efficiency isn't important, but any organization that focuses primarily on efficiency will go out of business because it lost sense of the values, it lost sense of what people really need, the human element. And, we're going to talk about AI, and, AI gives you the choice of which direction to go in.
Well, what do you What are you seeing in terms of trends and changes? Because I think we've been in the technology space for many years, and we've seen the value that technology brings in around efficiency, value. But I think the AI switch is a big step. It's an exponential switch that we're seeing now. But what are some of the big trends that you've started to see more recently, so over the last 12 months?
So I'll talk about trends, but like I'll also say that history repeats itself over and over and over again. And I was at Forrester Research at the leading edge of the internet boom and the internet economy, and I was responsible for all the economic modeling and talking about the change in the world and talking about how people were adopting the internet and organizations. And I think you could take my scripts from decades ago and swap out internet with AI, and a lot of those
Yeah,
are the
yeah, yeah.
same. And so one thing I'll sort of form before going into some trends I see is that the line that always sticks with me, all these technologies, there's tools, right? We are
Mhm.
human beings. We are not the buffalo in the age of the cavemen. We're the cavemen in the age of the buffalo. We won, right? We figured out how to change the environment, and technologies help. But at the end of the day, if you think about AI as a tool, a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? And so the tool doesn't shape who we are. It's the decisions we make about how we're going to use it. And so if we talk about AI trends, one is like every new technology that's disruptive, people are overhyping it, right? And you can look at what
Mhm.
I write. I'm part of that process, right? Like but what I see is where it's going to be in the short run. There's going to be huge failures. People are going to overinvest, right? Because like every technology, people think about the simplistic applications of it, right? We can bolt on this little AI agent over here, and somehow that's going to make our business magical. But what happens is they just bolt on that AI, and now they've added cost to their architecture and cost to their support, because now they just have like this another piece that they have to maintain,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they've put on, and they haven't fully thought of it, right? So it's not completely integrated. So now we have this sort of patchwork of technology to piece it together with our data. And now the overhead of our applications are more expensive than they used to be, because we didn't deeply think about how to use AI, not to try and do what we always do in a different, more glamorous way, but how to rethink what we do in an AI-centric way. So that I think is a big trend, the overuse and the short-term thinking
Yeah.
about AI. I think another trend is, and this is sort of my hope, right? Which is that as we talk about AI as being almost cognitive, right? Human cognitive, have the cognition of a human being. Um, People get scared, right? People think about what happens to our humanity and our values. And I'm banking with, and I'm trying to be a
Mhm.
part of making that banking work, is that, and I'm starting to see it, which is why there's so much. I love seeing the energy around my humanity at scale work, which is that people are saying we are not going to be the people who suffer from the technology, but we can be the ones who drive it to improve our humanity. So let's resurrect what's important to us. And I see that, if I was to describe like leaders today versus leaders like 30 years ago, there's a lot of drones, right? We've sent them to
Mhm.
business school, right? They've learned how to follow rote paths, right? Cut this, cut it to the bone, get it. McKinsey and Bain have taught us how to extract dollars from operations that aren't quite perfect. But those organizations haven't done a good job, whether it's the consulting companies or the leading MBA programs, to help leaders understand how do you deliver value and leave behind a legacy that you would be proud of in the future, and that serves humanity, doesn't just try and extract value from it.
Wow. So how do you think you start to address that, or how do we start to address those issues and start to get that humanity into the up and coming leaders?
Yeah, I mean,
Because I think you're onto a really interesting point. I remember when I went to business school for my undergrad years ago, there were a lot of people who couldn't wait to go to McKinsey or couldn't wait to go to Accenture, one of these, and you could see very much they were on the path that you just described. And I'm just trying to think back, what would have taken to have them look at some other angle around this?
yeah, so I don't think there's anything it could have taken. Like I think
Hmm.
that sort of the forces of organizations sort of coalesce around the moments in time that are
Hmm.
there, right? They did what was going on then. I believe that now, I see AI as a catalyst for change, right? Huge catalyst for
Hmm.
change. And with any catalyst for change, you have to decide what direction that's change going in. So I think it's a moment in time when we can do those things differently. And I think that, I mean, I have nothing against Bain. I have really good friends at
Sure.
Bain and McKinsey and all that, and they've done great work. But what they've done is they've infused a way to think about leadership that
Hmm.
we have to unstick. And that to me is it. Let's move forward and unstick what we've learned about leadership. And it's not about you asked the question to begin with, right, about efficiency, right? Efficiency, the reason people focus on efficiency is the easiest way to make a business case. It is in fact the lazy person's approach to trying to deploy a new technology, right? Because I don't have to rethink my
Hmm.
business, right? I start with the same spreadsheet, right? And I say, if I do this number in that spreadsheet goes away or lowers, and then I'll tell you the bottom line. Well, you keep going like that, and all you have is a thinner and thinner spreadsheet. As opposed to, I believe that leaders need to see the future, inspire people to do better, and have their organizations imagine how they can deliver value in new ways that improve humanity. And I think AI can help there. I'm not going to tell you that AI will help there. It's up to what we decide to do with it.
How do you think we get there? Because you've got a lot of
Yeah.
organizations now looking at AI as just another technology, and they're bringing it in for tools that just allow them, and there's pressure to be more efficient, to use tools to automate better. So digital onboarding, in-app guidance, success playbooks that are driven by AI. Where's that line as well between things like that being helpful and delivering value to customers versus being perceived as it's just technology, that humanity is not there? How do you balance the two?
So I think that I have two answers to that. How do we do it in general, and then like
Hmm.
my approach. I'll start with the second part, my approach, which is it's an overwhelming proposition to say we want to change how like the world works and how people think. So I just always my message is we do it one decision, one conversation, one moment at a time. That's my view on the world. Like if I can get one leader today to make a different decision, then we're heading in the right direction, right? You can't get overwhelmed with the size of the problem that freezes you from taking action on it, right? Because I'm a big
Hmm.
believer in the snowball effect, right? Which is we don't have to get everyone in the world on board. All we have to do is get a small group of people operating in the same direction, and it'll get momentum. So that's sort of the change. But how do you get like organizations and leaders to change now in this moment is to think about what's the second order of value you can get from deploying AI, right? Because I don't think we can get people to immediately break through from the efficiency trap, right? Because they have to
Hmm.
make a business case. But my view is if you are going to drive efficiency, if you think you're going to drive efficiency with AI, don't pull that money out of the business, right? And that's the trap that I see organizations do, right? um, if you believe in AI enough that you're going to deploy it to drive efficiency, then you should understand that it's going to change the nature of your business and the nature of how you compete over the next few years. So if you get efficiencies, put it back in the business, right? Talk about how can we now use AI to work better with our people, to be more human partners. A lot of things I've written about is the notion of human AI collaboration, right? Because I think that that's more of the future than AI taking over the world, because at the end of the day, human beings have unique characteristics like awe and hope and values and trust, and none of that can be replaced by AI. What can be replaced by AI are rote sort of tasks and sort of very, very advanced cognitive thinking. Those are great things, but they're even better. It's sort of like, Reese's, where they say, peanut butter and chocolate, two great tastes that taste even better together. I think that's sort of the greatness of humanity and human beings with the raw power and cognitive ability of AI is the Reese's of the future.
I love that. As I'm listening to you as well, I'm just sort of thinking, as the focus on efficiency comes into play, that it can actually degrade a lot of relationships that you have with customers, with coworkers, because you're spending less time trying to solve problems together, less time trying to figure things out. You're doing more things at scale. What are some examples that you could give, or some ways that people could actually go the other direction? And, like you say, use AI to enhance relationships and use AI to enhance humanity, the way that you're talking about. Because I think, the words that you're saying are really inspirational. And I'm just thinking, how could people best execute against that? What would it look like?
Yeah, so and this is where we go back. There are a lot of the principles that we've known for decades hold true now, right? And the thing about, like, if we talk about how do we instill a sense of humanness when we're using AI to, like you said, to scale those and sort of make interactions sort of more digital and more automated, which is all you have to do is think about the moments that require human touch, right? And it used to be in the old days. Well, I ran the first Six Sigma programs at General Electric, right? And one of the process truths that I always held is that if you are designing a process, a big process, you need to design the exceptions simultaneously, right? If you don't design for the exceptions, then they break down the process because they exist. So to me, if you're going to talk about deploying AI with customers or deploying AI with employees as part of the onboarding, you have to think about, okay, as part of that design, where are the moments where we want to insert or are going to need to insert human touch in the process? So you have to make that part of the design. I think that is an area people have forgotten, right? So they deploy AI as if it alone. They don't design those human touch moments that either, like I said, either come because AI can't do it, or we want to have because we want to instill a sense of connection with whoever that human being is we're trying to touch.
We've talked about this before, because you have the idea of everyone was pushing for everything to be tech touch. We want everything, onboarding, support, all tech touch. But we always said it's more about technology enabled. So you use technology, and I don't think AI is any different. It's an evolution of this. It's you use technology, but when you need to bring the human in, the human comes in at the right point and provides that additional value. So you need the real blend of the two. What have you seen in the research you've done, Bruce, when you've seen companies using AI in the way you're talking about to deliver that right balance? What have you seen that differentiates companies that are doing it like this versus ones that are not doing it right? How do they look like as companies on the outside?
So I will say I haven't seen a lot that are doing it really, really well,
Okay.
because I think that there's just a rush for deployment.
Yeah.
But where I've seen it done well, it follows a pattern of almost looking like, a design thinking type of approach, right? Which is that we design experiences, we don't deploy technology. And so, thinking about how humans will interact, thinking about what their engagement is with a process you're designing or with a set of tools you're trying to deploy, all of that requires the going back to good experience design approaches. And so in areas in organizations that have a strong experience design heritage, they tend to be doing these things better. But I'll also say that let's not just say that the future is human and AI across all things. I mean, I think that there's what we have to also recognize is there needs to be a rebalancing, right? There's a bunch of things that probably AI should be doing and human beings shouldn't be doing. Right. And that'll open up if we rethink value. So if we think about a big law firm, right? There's no reason we should have junior staff trying to look through old cases, one at one, because if you want to review hundreds and hundreds of pieces of case law, a human being can get through about 10 of them and then forget the first one they did as they're moving on to the 11th and 12th. It's just not an effective mechanism for human beings. So we have to rethink work. And I think that's part of the design process. We have to rethink the way we connect with people. We have to rethink our processes. And I will tell you the one thing that I don't have a good answer for. One of my guests, brilliant on my podcast, was a brilliant guy, Faisal Hawk. And he raised this awareness, and it was like I had missed it, and it was like my lights went on. I was like, oh my God, I didn't think of that. Which is that if we think about even like I talked about law, we think about medicine, or we think about just any really sort of thought-driven type of profession, that AI helps a lot with entry-level roles, right? But it doesn't come close to replacing the value of experts and expertise, right? That remains distinct. But if you remove all the entry level sort of roles, you never get people that get to those expertise levels, right? So we're almost putting ourselves in a position where we're going to starve expertise from our society. So that's a problem that I'm just starting to sort of wrap my hands around, to think about how do we sort of make sure that we're not starving the future based on taking advantage of the current moment.
I like that, because I think, it's the experts that teach the AI, or at least hopefully. And if you run into new experts, but there's also that whole issue of, there's a lot of common practice out there, not necessarily what's the best practice, and the opportunity for AI to learn from the wrong things. But Bruce, I'm curious, as you talk to so many folks and you do all the things that you do, what are some warning signs or some flags or checklists that people should be looking out for to say, hey, we're experimenting with AI. This is how I know we're on the right track, or I should watch out for this. This would be a clue that I'm heading in the wrong direction. How should folks who are new to this pay attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first one is, if you are in meetings, how much of your time is talking about the technology versus the goals and the values of the organization, right? It's easy. I've seen for decades, right? Like, anytime you're trying to deploy a technology, you sort of fall into this trap of overemphasizing the technology. So that's one thing. If you're in meetings and all you're talking about the technology, not the value the organization creates, not the vision for where you want it to be, that's a huge problem. The second is, I think, if you are reaching beyond your technical capabilities to deploy, then you probably have a problem. In other words, like a lot of the value from AI for organizations, not only, but a lot of it comes from integration into data and workflows of an organization. And I just wrote something about sort of how it's going to change employee or experience management platforms, right? That the underlying structure has to be changed. So there's a ton of architectural work that has to happen with AI for it to get secondary benefits, right? It's pretty easy to create simple tools. But if you really want to rework the flow and a lot of the value you get from AI, you have to have deep architectural discussions about where data is, what type of agents you want to deploy, what's the role of agents. And part of the problem we have now is that oftentimes the people talking about those things are technologists. And the people who need to direct it don't understand any of that, right? So you have, so one of the things I would say is if you're a leader and you are offloading sort of a bunch of technology to technologists to do something, then you should probably slow them down. Because what I've learned over and over again, and what I look for in leaders is it's that leaders should never invest in a technology if they don't understand how it works and what it's going to do. That doesn't mean they have to be able to design it, but they have to make sure that it's being explained on what it's going to do in clear enough terms so that they can put their imprint on it. And I've seen this now, not that all leaders do that, but I'll give you another sort of example. I'll go back in the Wayback Machine. So when I used to be at Forrester Research, and teams from vendors and companies would come in and we'd sit around a big conference room and I'm giving them, they thought I had some wisdom. I probably had less wisdom than I was trying to communicate that I had at the time. But if they were in the room and they were just like writing down what I was saying and planning to follow it as a playbook, then I knew they were going to fail, right? Because they were offloading the thinking about what they were going to do their organization to someone else. The groups that came in and challenged me, it was painful at the time, right? It is much better when people just say, okay, you said it, we're going to do it. But the people came in and challenged me because they were trying to understand how what I was saying really impacted them. And in some cases, they were right. What I was saying didn't make sense for them. But they were internalizing it and thinking about how they wanted to operate in a world that was different in the future. And that is so critical. I look for that all the time, right? If I hear a leader saying, "Oh yeah, we're deploying AI over there and it does this," I know it's going to be an expensive endeavor and they're probably going to get rid of it in a couple months. If they say, "No, our leadership team is thinking about how we can deliver against our purpose in a new way, and we're starting with a pilot over here because we think it'll teach us this," they're going to succeed, or they're more likely to succeed.
That's the key thing. I think there are lots of organizations that are trying too many things with AI right now. Some are trying everything, really big scale things, but you've got to look at it to start with. What are some of the things that we know we can get value from? What are some quick wins we can do and run it like a project? I think the other risk is there's a lot of organizations that see AI right now as a technology that will save costs. Maybe they're thinking it'll reduce headcount, but that in itself has a ripple effect through to, if you're just looking at that and efficiency, going back to what we said earlier on, but that has a ripple impact back through to customer experience, employee experience. What does that impact the team? And we've got to think these things through. These can't be short-term decisions. And I think your point about leadership is really key, because you need that. It's visionary. I really, this is a change that is big. It's an accelerated pace of change that we've not seen before. You talked about kind of the internet coming in, but this is really going a lot faster than that, and having amazing impact. But you've got to still have that vision. What does this mean for my company? Not that I'm just more efficient, but this is what we can do. This is how we change what we're delivering value. I think it's a fascinating area. Bruce, before we wrap up, I'd love for our listeners to tell us a bit more about what you're working on at Humanity at Scale. What are some of the big ideas you're exploring right now? What are some of the projects you guys are looking at?
So, we pretty much continue on on message, right? We're trying to do three things: inspire leaders to create more human-centric organizations, empower them with sort of approaches and mindsets and easy things they can do to go down that path. And then the third is that we want to direct technology to be more human-centric, right? Like we want to help those people deploying and using and creating AI to have a more human-centric approach in what they do. So you'll see, you know, I focus primarily on two things. I have a blog, a weekly blog, and I have a podcast that comes out every week or two. And the purpose of that is to inspire and empower leaders. I have no sponsors. I have no attempt. You're never trying to sell anything that comes that I do. It really is. I talk about humanity at scale as sort of my passion give back after a very lucky career of helping organizations in many different ways. So I urge you, if you're interested in any of this, come visit us at humanityatscale.com. It's about as easy as that.
I think it's a really, it is all of that, you know, humanity oriented technology. How do we make sure we're still in the organizations, we're still driving the value? Bruce, this has been a really, really cool conversation. What we like to do for our listeners is give a kind of a breakthrough challenge for them. And the one for our listeners today, so this is for all the SaaS listeners, take one process that you've looked at automating this year. Maybe it's onboarding, maybe it's renewal minders, and have a look at it for emotional intent and ask yourself, would I feel cared for if I receive this email? So listen to what Bruce has said. Don't forget about the humanity, but I think it's a really key thing. But that emotional intent is really key. And if it's not there, change one thing this week to make it more human. Bruce, this has been such a good conversation. Thank you for bringing in the psychology behind loyalty into the age of technology, the age of AI. And I think, as Bruce said, for everyone listening, go and check out his podcast, his blog. Follow them is on LinkedIn, but Humanity at Scale, there's so much great stuff there. And it's a really, really cool conversation to listen to and be part of.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Breakthrough SaaS Growth with the Jasons. If you found today's episode useful, make sure you subscribe, check out our website at breakthroughsaasgrowth.com, and follow us on all the usual social media channels for more insights and updates. And don't forget to share the show with your colleagues who are driving growth in SaaS. See you next time.